it's Robin again from VInoStitchers. And if you remember from our last floss tube, Katie and I were going to be attending a retreat called the Steel City Stitchers Retreat. It's in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And while I was there, I was able to finish my patriotic TinyTown. I had a blast doing that. Love this. So there is that. So I needed to come up with a finishing idea. So I've seen a lot of different finishing ideas. One of the things that I had seen before I went to the retreat was the idea of finishing it on a wooden spool. So I couldn't believe it. I walked into the retreat. The one vendor they had there was called the Crafty U, and it's in Ohio, and I'll link it down below. They had some of the wooden spools. And here's the one that I purchased. I mean, it's just beautiful. Look at it. I love it. In the top, they have 5 spots for your scissors. And they are made by, if you can see at the bottom, Pete's Bee Skeps. Here's what the bottom looks like. And if you go on his, there was a YouTube video that I saw. If you go on his page, there's all different kinds of these, all different color wood, all different sizes, big, small, all different types. But the one that they showed with this one was one that was particularly made to do finishing on the TinyTowns. So I've never done this before. I'm going to try to walk through it and maybe take you along on the journey and see if we can figure out how to do a finishing with the TinyTown on the Bee Skep. So stay tuned. Okay, so what I'm going to do is take my TinyTown with my fabric. I'm going to be putting them face to face and then sewing them around, and then I'll be able to flip it out so it'll have a backing. To do that, I'm going to measure on my back a 1/2 inch from each, really more like 3/4 of an inch, because I want to have a count a little bit for that seam that I'm going to be sewing on with the fabric. So I'm going to do like 3/4 of an inch. I'm going to measure using my long ruler. I will line it up across. I'm going to use the bottom because it's a little more straight. The top, the houses are all different sizes, so it's a little harder to use. So I will measure, again, using the back, 3/4 of an inch. I'm using my friction pen, and I will measure 3/4 of an inch and draw that line, and then I can use that bottom line to help make my top line, because like I said, the houses are kind of all different sizes, so it's hard to just use that. Okay, my next step is I took my TinyTown and I kind of narrowed it down a little bit, made this about 3/4 of an inch, and then I made a little mark here. I made an inch, 3/4 of an inch in here, 3/4 of an inch in here, and on both sides. And I have my twine, and that's what we're going to use to tie this around my drum. So I'm going to take that, I'm going to lay my TinyTown on my fabric, like I said, face down. I'm going to take my twine and lay it underneath there, because I want it to be, when I turn it, I want it to be on the outside, of course, so we're going to put it on the inside. I'm going to lay my twine, and I used about 15 inches. It's probably more than I need, but I would rather have more than enough and I can cut it off. So I'm going to lay both pieces of twine underneath here and just let it stick out a little bit so I can see where it's at. And when I sew, I will sew right over top of that. That way it'll be attached. Okay, so we'll start with that. I have an open toe foot, and I'm going to shorten my stitch length to like 2 right now. And I will go down with my foot, and I'm going to do like a back stitch once I get started here. So I'll go forward a little bit, I'll do a back stitch. And I just have my twine, I don't know if you can see it here, but my twine is sticking out a little bit on this side. I'm going to just sew right over top of that. And actually, I think I'm just going to back stitch over top of that twine. And so now I'm going to come up to the other one. I'm going to backstitch over top of that twine just to hold it in place. Okay, now I'm going to continue along. I'll just pivot. And now the main thing is when you are sewing, you don't want to get your threads, your twine caught. So I'm going to move it off to the side. I'm going to stitch along this long side. Right on the line. Okay, and then I came to my other corner. I'm going to turn it again. And now I'm going to take my other two pieces of twine. And again, if you can see, I have those lines marked. I'm going to stick the twine up underneath there, tuck it up in, let it stick out just a little bit on this side. I'm going to say I have it sticking out about an inch and a half, 2 inches. Doesn't really matter because it's going to be on the inside once I turn it around. So I have that there. And one more piece of twine. I don't know where it went to. Okay, found my other piece of twine. Again, I have my line drawn here. I'm gonna stick this up underneath there. Let it stick out a little bit. And I'm gonna sew right over top of those. Make sure this one's in place. And I'll backstitch over that again just to hold it in place. Go down to my other one. Stitch over it and backstitch. Now this is where it might get a little tricky because I have 4 pieces of twine tucked up in there and I want to make sure I don't stitch over any of them. So I'm going to push them all way up inside there. So I know they're out of way of this line that I'm going to be stitching across. Down to the corner, turn. I'm checking to make sure there's no twine sticking out. Just double checking to make sure there's no twine. Looks good. To the end and stitch back up through there and end it. So I have completely sewn the whole way around there. Both of them turned face to face. I am going to trim this to about a ½ inch the whole way around, and we'll do that at the table on the other side. So meet you over there. All right, I have my trimmed piece. Usually what I do is take some scissors and trim that little corner a little bit because it just kind of reduces the bulk in the corner. Trim those off. All right, finally what I'm going to do is cut a little hole in the back here, being real careful not to cut my twine or my cross stitch. So you just pull it out. I'm going to put a little snip in because I don't want to cut my twine by mistake, which could easily happen with that. I just need a hole that's big enough to turn this inside out. So you can see my twine's right there, and I don't want to cut that, so I'm trying to push it out of the way. Okay, and I have a hole like that big. I don't know if that's going to be big enough. I might need to make it a little bigger. And I'm going to use that, and I'm just going to work and get my project turned inside out. So I'll show you what that looks like when I'm done. So the next thing I'm going to do is take my turning tool, and this can be tricky with cross stitch, so you need to be very careful. I'm going to poke these lightly to try to get those corners to come out a little better. You can see my ties are there. So I just work with this a little bit at a time and try to get those corners poked out a little better so they're not, make them look a little more squared and not so bulky. And you need to be careful because that will poke through. I've done that a few times. So I'll show you what this looks like when I'm done. All right, next step is I have it all ironed and my twine is attached. So as you can see, I have a little hole in the back, which you wouldn't need to cover, but it kind of bothers me. So what I'm going to do is take a little piece of wool that I have. I have this Heat and Bond light. I'm going to sew I'm going to attach the Heat and Bond light with my iron and then cut out a little piece that I can attach to the back just to cover that up, because just to make it look a little neater. So I'll show you what that looks like. All right, so finally, again, there's my front. I attached the little patch on the back with that heat and light stick. So the little piece of wool is attached there, and that just kind of covers up that hole in the back. And then we are ready to tie this around, and you can see I have longer twine than I need. I will cut that off. I'll get this ready and show you what the finishing product looks like. All right, here is my finished drum. Got my scissors in the top. It is tied with my twine. I love it. I guess if I was going to change one thing when I do, because I do plan to do all the other TinyTowns, if I would change anything, I would try to make this a little less wide, maybe not so wide, so it would fit the drum more, maybe a little bit better. But for my first try and with just kind of winging it with no tutorial to follow, I think I'm pretty happy with it. So there is Patriotic TinyTown on the wooden spool from Pete's Bee Skeps. Thanks for watching.